The ritual. In the lodge, it all starts when Richard decides to get a divorce so he can be with Grace. The news is unbearable for his ex-wife, Laura, who takes her own life. Months later, trying to rebuild his family, Richard takes his kids, Aiden and Mia, to spend Christmas with Grace at an isolated cabin up in the mountains. The problem is that Grace carries a terrifying past of her own. As a kid, she was the only survivor of a mass suicide led by her own father, who ran a religious cult. When Richard has to head back to the city for a few days, the siblings put a cruel plan into motion. They hide food, personal items, and most importantly, Grace's psychiatric meds. Little by little, they make her believe everyone has died and they're all stuck in purgatory. It gets so intense that she completely loses touch with reality. By the time Richard finally comes back, it's already too late. Convinced that everyone needs to be purified, Grace kills her own fiancé right in front of the kids. Then she sits Aiden and Mia at the table next to their father's body and tapes everyone's mouth shut with the word sin written on it, recreating the exact scene from the cult she grew up in. The movie ends before showing the final shot, but that's exactly the scariest part. Everything points to Grace planning to finish the same ritual she escaped from as a child. And even if that doesn't happen, it's hard to imagine anyone walking out of there alive. The imposter. In Goodnight Mommy, twin brothers Elias and Lucas wait for their mom to come home after facial surgery. The problem is that she comes back completely wrapped in bandages, distant, and a little off. Little by little, the two of them start to believe that this woman isn't their real mom, but an imposter who took her place. Convinced of that, they decide to force a confession out of her. Things get more and more tense until the mom ends up trapped inside her own house, desperately trying to convince Elias that she's telling the truth. It's only at the end that we find out the big twist. Lucas died before the events of the movie even started, and Elias spent the whole story talking to a hallucination he made up to escape the guilt over his brother's death. The mom was never ignoring Lucas out of cruelty. She simply couldn't respond to someone who didn't exist. Even realizing that her son is completely lost, she can't bring him back to reality. And in the end, Elias starts a fire that burns down the house, killing his own mother. In the final scene, he shows up walking through a cornfield next to her and Lucas, as if the family was finally back together again. A bunch of clues were hidden from the very start, like the fact that Lucas never directly interacts with any other character besides Elias. It's one of those endings that completely changes a second watch of the movie. The Puppet. In Possum, we meet Philip, a former children's puppeteer who goes back to the house where he grew up carrying a pretty unusual suitcase. Inside it is Possum, a creepy puppet with a spider's body and a face just like his own. Throughout the whole movie, Philip tries to get rid of the creature, burying it, burning it, and even throwing the puppet away, but it always seems to come back. Meanwhile, a boy goes missing in the area, and Philip's strange behavior makes everyone believe he might be involved. It's only at the end that we understand the real monster was never Philip. When he confronts his uncle Maurice, we find out he was the one behind the abuse that marked the main character's entire childhood, and that he was also keeping another kid locked up inside the house.
No! Turn over! No, Morris, no!
Philip manages to save the boy and finally kills Maurice, ending the cycle of violence. That's when the meaning of the puppet becomes clear. Possum was never a supernatural creature, but a physical representation of Philip's trauma. The long legs symbolize the abuser creeping into his room when he was a kid, while the face, just like his own, represents the guilt he carried his entire life. In the final scene, Philip is sitting next to the burned remains of the puppet, but he's still holding its head. It's a sad image because it shows that even free from Maurice, the trauma is still part of who he is. The Trap. In Last Shift, Jessica Lauren is a rookie cop who agrees to spend her first night on duty in a shut-down police station. The building looks empty, but it hides a gruesome past. A year earlier, a satanic cult led by John Michael Paymon ended in tragedy there, and Jessica's father died during the operation to take the group down. As the night goes on, Jessica starts seeing apparitions, hearing voices, and getting mysterious phone calls. Little by little, she completely loses track of what's real, while the cult's spirits mess with her mind. In the end, believing the station has been stormed by Paymon's old followers, Jessica opens fire on everyone in front of her. It's only afterward that the illusion fades. The victims were actually staff members who had just shown up to collect the last of the evidence from the building. Finding Jessica armed and out of her mind, Sergeant Cohen reacts and shoots her. As she dies, she starts singing the same hymn as the cult, a sign that her mind and her soul have been completely corrupted. And this is what she sees as she dies. The most disturbing part is that Jessica spent the whole night trying to honor her father's memory, but ended up being used by the very spirits he fought against. Still being watched. In the 2006 remake of the classic The Hills Have Eyes, we follow the Carter family on a trailer trip through the New Mexico desert. The trip, meant to celebrate the parents' wedding anniversary, turns into a nightmare when they take a supposed shortcut a gas station attendant points them to, and end up stranded in the middle of nowhere. They soon find out they're not alone. The area was used for nuclear testing decades earlier, and the few people who stayed behind suffered severe mutations. Now, this group lives isolated up in the hills and hunts down any traveler unlucky enough to cross their path. After losing part of his family and watching his baby daughter get kidnapped, Doug, who up to that point was the calmest character in the story, changes completely. He storms the mutants' hideout, willing to do anything to save Catherine. It's interesting how the movie turns the most peaceful man into the most ruthless one when there's no other option left. With the help of the dog beast and Ruby, a mutant who decides to betray her own family, Doug manages to get his daughter back. At the same time, Brenda and Bobby take on Papa Jupiter in the trailer and manage to bring him down. It looks like your typical survival ending. The few survivors finally find each other again and hug in the middle of the desert, except the relief only lasts a few seconds. The camera pulls back and reveals that someone is watching the group from far away through binoculars. There's at least one more mutant still alive, keeping an eye on everything. That one detail completely changes the ending. The fake daughter. In Bring Her Back, Andy, a 17-year-old teenager, and his half-sister Piper, a visually impaired girl, are orphaned after their dad is suddenly found dead. With no other family, the two of them end up in the care of Laura, a former social worker who, at first glance, seems like just an eccentric woman wanting to help. But the isolated house where they're going to live hides something a lot darker. Years earlier, Laura lost her daughter, Kathy, who drowned in the backyard pool, and she never got over that loss. The problem is she found some old videos teaching a resurrection ritual, and she started to believe that Piper would be the perfect body to bring her daughter back. To pull that off, Laura starts manipulating everyone around her. Her main target is Andy. She does everything she can to paint him as unstable and dangerous and to pull him away from his sister. It clicks for Andy when he finds out that Oliver, the other boy living in the house, is actually Connor Bird, a kidnapped child and a key piece of the ritual. Desperate, he reaches out to Wendy, the social worker still following their case, and manages to convince her to go to the house to check out what's going on. But by the time Wendy finally realizes Andy was right, it's already too late. Laura runs them both over with her car, kills Wendy on the spot, and drowns Andy in a rain puddle. He dies trying to save his sister, and he never does. In the final scene, Laura puts her plan into action in the same pool where she lost her daughter, convinced the ritual will finally bring Kathy back. But the scariest moment is when Piper, fighting to survive, calls Laura Mommy. That single word breaks the obsession. For a few seconds, Laura stops seeing Piper as a vessel and remembers the daughter she lost. She hesitates, lets the girl go, who escapes and gets rescued by a car passing by on the road. Connor comes to as soon as the possession lets him go and is found alive by the police. And in the end, the cops arrive and find Laura inside the pool, clinging to Kathy's body. The red lights. In the invitation, Will is a man who accepts an invite to a dinner at the house of his ex-wife, Eden, and her new husband, David. Years earlier, the two of them lost their young son in an accident, a tragedy that ended up destroying their marriage. Ever since then, Eden disappeared for a while and came back completely different after meeting a spiritual group during a trip. As soon as he gets to the house, Will feels like something is wrong. The doors stay locked, the hosts act strange, and two guests, Sadie and Pruitt, seem to follow an unsettling philosophy about accepting death as a form of release. At one point, the group even watches a video that treats death as something positive, which makes the whole mood even more uncomfortable. The problem is that nobody takes Will seriously. Since he's still hurting from the loss of his son, everyone believes his suspicions are just a product of the trauma. When another guest shows up at the party like normal, it really seems like he was just overreacting. Except Will was right the whole time. The cult's real goal is to kill its members to free them from pain and allow some kind of spiritual ascension. Right before the toast, he notices the glasses are poisoned. Even as he tries to stop it, one of the guests has already taken a drink and dies in front of everyone. That's when David, Pruitt, and Sadie launch their attack against their own friends. After a desperate fight, Will, Kira, and Tommy manage to survive. But Eden, regretting what she did, takes her own life after wounding Will, while Tommy manages to take down David. But the real shock comes in the last scene. Looking out over the city, the survivors see dozens of red lanterns lit up in house after house. Each light means another group from the same cult carried out a massacre that same night. In other words, what looked like an isolated case was actually part of a much bigger plan all over the city. The last recording. In Exhibit A, the horror plays out inside a seemingly ordinary family. The story introduces Judith King, a teenager from Yorkshire, who uses a camera given to her by her own dad, Andy, to record the family's daily life. At first, it all looks like just a home video of normal moments, but the recording starts to reveal secrets nobody wanted shown. Judith is hiding that she's a lesbian and hasn't been able to tell her family yet. She also has a crush on Claire, a girl from the neighborhood. Meanwhile, her dad, Andy, tries to convince everyone that his life is getting better, saying a promotion at work will let them buy a new house, except it was all a lie. Andy is drowning in financial and mental struggles. When the truth comes out, the image of the perfect father starts to fall apart. Things get worse when Andy finds out Judith filmed his unstable moments and starts exposing all of the family's secrets. He locks everyone inside the house and turns the camera into a kind of trial, even exposing his daughter's secret feelings. The next day, Judith finds her father about to take his own life. She tries to save him with a hug, but Andy, completely destroyed by his own mind, attacks his daughter and then kills the rest of the family.
No! No! No, it's all gonna be fine.
When it seems like it's all over, the camera keeps rolling and reveals a terrifying detail. Judith is still alive. The movie ends without showing what happens to her, but it leaves the worst part on record. That camera, which started out as a simple gift, became the only witness to the destruction of an entire family. The Abyss. In the movie As Above, So Below, we follow Scarlett Marlowe, an archaeologist obsessed with finishing her father's research on the legendary Philosopher's Stone. Convinced the artifact is hidden in the catacombs of Paris, she gathers a small group of explorers and heads into the forbidden tunnels, with no idea that this expedition goes way beyond archaeology. The deeper they go, the more the place feels alive. The hallways defy logic, passages move around, and each member starts getting haunted by their own traumas and regrets. The movie makes it clear that this maze isn't just an underground graveyard, but a kind of personal hell where nobody can run from their own guilt. In the end, only Scarlett, George, and Zed are still alive. Scarlett realizes the real Philosopher's Stone was never an object hidden in the catacombs. The real power only shows up when she finally accepts her own mistakes, especially the guilt over her father's death. After that realization, she manages to save George and finds the only way out, except getting out of there defies all logic. Instead of climbing up to the surface, the three of them have to throw themselves into a huge abyss. They fall and, all of a sudden, come up through a manhole on the streets of Paris, as if the way out of hell was to keep going down. That's exactly the idea that makes the ending so unsettling. The movie suggests that hell isn't a place full of demons, but a space created by people's own traumas. The Hidden Killer. The Last Broadcast starts out as an investigative documentary about a crime that was never fully explained. David Lee takes on the role of filmmaker and tries to find out what really happened to the crew of the show Fact or Fiction, which vanished during a live broadcast while hunting for the legend of the Jersey Devil, a creature that supposedly lives in the Pine Barrens forest. On the night of the expedition, hosts Stephen Avcast and Locus Wheeler head into the woods along with sound tech Rain Clacken and the psychic Jim Seward. Hours later, only Jim comes back alive. The bodies of two members are found in the forest, while Stephen disappears without a trace. Jim ends up convicted of the murders, even with a bunch of contradictions in the investigation. But before a new trial can happen, he dies in prison, and the case seems closed for good. Years later, David gets his hands on a tape recorded that night and asks specialist Shelley Monarch for help recovering the footage. As the technology restores the frames of the recording, it becomes clear that Jim wasn't the killer. Then comes the twist. When Shelley digitally reconstructs the face of the person caught on the tape, she discovers the criminal is David Lee himself. It's one of those twists that makes the viewer rethink everything they heard during the movie. The trustworthy investigator was actually the killer, trying to control the narrative from the very start. To keep the truth from coming out, David kills Shelley and hides the body in the same forest where it all began. Then he just goes right back to filming his documentary, as if he were still looking for answers. The Cursed Love. In Obsession, the story is about Bear, a young guy who's in love with Nikki, his co-worker and friend. Not brave enough to reveal his feelings, he buys a mysterious object called the One Wish Willow, a magic branch that can grant a single wish. The problem is, these wishes always come at a price. Bear asks for Nikki to love him more than anyone else in the world, but the object takes that the worst way possible. Instead of creating a perfect romance, it turns her feelings into an uncontrollable obsession. From that point on, Nikki stops acting like herself. She starts living only for Bear, as if her own will had been erased. The most disturbing part is how the movie plays with the idea of a love that looks perfect on the outside, but is really a prison. In the end, driven by the obsession, she kills their other close friends, Sarah and Ian. When he realizes the disaster he caused, Bear finds out the only way to undo the wish is with his own death. Desperate, he swallows a whole bottle of oxycodone to kill himself. Except at the last second, Bear has second thoughts. He doesn't actually want to die and runs to throw the pills back up. And that's exactly where everything falls apart. Nikki finds the last One Wish Willow and makes her own wish, for Bear to love her the same way she loves him. The spell works instantly. Bear stops trying to throw up, walks out of the bathroom, and kisses Nikki. For a few seconds, the two of them live the perfect romance, but the pills he couldn't get out of his system are already kicking in. Bear dies in her arms. In that moment, the curse fades, and Nikki finally comes back to her senses. The cruelest detail is that Nikki wakes up right when there's nothing left to save. All of her friends are dead, and she'll very likely be blamed for everything. And by the way, Obsession is a movie packed with hidden details you don't catch the first time you watch it. So up on the screen is a video where we break down a bunch of hidden details in Obsession that nobody noticed. Click and watch, I'll see you there.